Josh and Ryan.
What's your name?
My name is Samantha.
Hey, Samantha.
Nice to meet you both.
You as well.
My question is a bit abstract. I just want an excuse to get up here. But throughout your minimalism journey, you discuss that it can and will change. Is there an intentional way that you reassess your values? How do you know when your values change? Over time.
It's a pretty broad question. What are you struggling with right now with respect to your values?
I mean, when I started out on this minimalism journey, I had not a vision board, but I wrote down what I value, like health, yoga, all those things. And I guess I haven't come back to that. And I was wondering, do you reassess every so often, or is there a certain way you look at it?
And the reason you haven't gone back to it, I think I know it, but maybe you can tell me.
I guess it's working so far.
Because it is working so far?
Or maybe some things are not working.
Yeah.
I mean, it never hurts to double check on your values, I guess.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the problem we often run into with these types of things is we feel as though we're supposed to make, whether it's a goal spreadsheet or a vision board, they're functionally the same thing.
Yeah.
Or, write down all your values. We have a values worksheet in the book to better understand your values. The main reason that we have that is there are 4 different types of values. It's like building a house. You have you have foundational values. Everyone has a similar foundation in their house. But above that, you have structural values. Everyone's house looks a little bit different on the interior, so everyone has different structural values. Beyond that, you have surface values. It's things that make life interesting or beautify your house. The big problem is the 4th category, though. We have these imaginary values. And that's how we spend our day every day. We spend our days doing things that we know aren't that important to us, but the truth is they are the most important things to us. However you spend your 24 hours, and this isn't a value judgment, it's not a morality claim, it's merely that if I spend an hour after this scrolling through Twitter, that's fine. But it is that, in that moment, is the most important thing to me. Now, I can say something else is, just like I can say my health is really important to me, but when I weighed 100 pounds more than I weigh now, it obviously wasn't. It was hypothetically important to me, but that was a lip service value. I can tell you this, at the beginning of each year, my wife and I, we sit down and we just sort of look at each other's values, because I find that the people closest to me, it's good to understand what they value, so I know how to best interact with them and understand what they appreciate, so I too can appreciate it. And then, of course, at times we'll have conflicting values, and just like we have conflicting personalities. Ryan and I are radically different from each other, but that's what makes a relationship interesting. If we were carbon copies of one another, then we wouldn't need both of us on stage tonight.
Although I would kill for that hair. Oh man, we did a show in Atlanta, and there was a comedian named J.P. Sears. He was our guest, and he said something. Someone asked about beliefs and values, and he was like, I think you should have your beliefs. You should hold them tight. You should love them, but don't believe your beliefs. Yeah. And as an anecdote, it is funny, but there's a lot of depth in that statement, because anything that we hold on too tightly, sometimes it will drag us. Yeah. And we have to be willing to let go. And that, when I talk about the willingness to let go being a superpower, it really is. And that's not just with our things, but it's also with some values and beliefs. And I think it's totally appropriate to look at those every once in a while. I know for me, if something's off, if I'm feeling anxious or depressed or whatever it is, I can quickly, in my mind, look at those foundational values and ask myself, okay, how full are each of those buckets? Yeah. And then, the least full bucket, if that makes sense, that's what I'll focus on. Maybe one day I look at those and I'm like, oh, those buckets are full, but something else is still off. I mean, having the willingness to let go, the willingness to walk away from a value or even a belief, it gives me the room to explore, really. So yeah, I think we should always be exploring, and yeah, of course things change.
Yeah.
You know, I'm thinking about, we have a friend named Derek Sivers. He wrote a book called Hell Yeah or No. And one of the things he talks about was quite often our identity gets tied up in these things that we say we value or things that we valued once upon a time. So when we talk about our values, those foundational values, they tend not to change. Health, relationships, community, contribution, things like that. You know, it's half dozen to a dozen foundational values. But the structure can change from time to time as you change your life. Maybe you have a radical life change. Like when I walked away from my corporate career, my structural values changed quite a bit. But the values that tend to change are those surface values. We repaint our homes. The problem is we're constantly trying to change the surface when it's like we're trying to paint a burning house. It's like, oh, this will fix it. But we don't actually figure out what's going on inside the structure. And part of that is our identity. We cling to the things that we used to find valuable, those things that were surface values before. So Derek, he was a full-time musician, I think for 20 years. And he went around and he would play festivals, and that's how he earned a living. But then he left that behind, you know, over, probably 2 decades ago now, or 15 years ago, and yet he still like kept some of the instruments, and he had a piano and a guitar and some recording equipment, which would all be fine, but he wasn't using any of it. And he realized, like, oh, I say I value being a musician, but I don't. And in fact, it stresses me out thinking I might have to go back to that. And it was incredibly freeing the day that he put it all out for free on, you know, Craigslist, wherever the website was, and people just came over and picked up the guitar and all this stuff, and now it's in a home where it's actually being used, and he's no longer tethered to that old identity.
Yeah.
Thanks for your question.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Appreciate you being here.
Did you enjoy this standalone Patreon highlight? If so, you can listen to full episodes of the Minimalist Private Podcast, available exclusively on Patreon. Visit patreon.com/theminimalists or click the link in the description. Your support keeps our podcast and YouTube channel 100% advertisement free.